Right now, Lukashenko has given the order. A massive army is breaking through the borders. Putin has moved on Estonia. Has Kaliningrad really become the point of departure? Shock, Azerbaijan struck back. Putin on his knees? The Kremlin has never fallen this loudly. The armed forces of Ukraine have done the impossible. They are finishing off the enemy with all their might. A massive rout of columns of equipment. Manpower turned to ashes. Shocking! Naval drones are encircling Russian ports. The Black Sea Fleet, a deadly maze, has finally dragged Russia to the bottom. All this in our episode Hellpoint. Urgent. Little green men have appeared right on NATO territory. That's it, Putin has moved on Estonia. The first steps have been taken. The alliance is cornering the dictator in response. The Kremlin is throwing up its hands. At this very moment, a second front is unfolding. An unexpected twist. Belarus is urgently mobilizing its military. Lukashenko has made up his mind. He is the first to go into battle. What will this mean for him? And will the West be able to immediately extinguish the flames of Russian, Belarusian audacity? More on this in just a moment.
Putin's little green men are already at Estonia's doorstep. It seems the bunker dweller is preparing a Crimea 2.0 operation in Europe. Western media are publishing footage where you can see armed men on the road. Judging by their uniforms, it's clear these are not Russian border guards. Due to the sudden activation of unidentified Russian troops in the areas of checkpoints between Russia and Estonia, the police department has urgently closed the country's eastern borders.
We decided to close the road to prevent possible provocations and incidents. Our main goal is the safety of the Estonian population. Günter Pedosk, operational manager of the southern prefecture.
The safety of their own population is the top priority for all Baltic countries. Thus, starting today, Latvia is deporting at least 841 Russian citizens from the country. These are Russians who were unable to prove even a basic knowledge of the Latvian language. The EU country no longer wants to see the Kremlin's fifth column on its territory.
The stay of such Russians in Latvia will be considered illegal, and their access to social services will be closed. If the Russians remain, they will face deportation. Madara Puki is a representative of the Latvian Office of Citizenship and Migration Affairs.
Due to a possible Russian attack on NATO, the alliance is preparing to evacuate 1,200,000 people. That is the number of citizens, according to the authorities of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, who would need to flee from war in the event of aggression from the Kremlin. This concerns at least a 40-kilometer strip along the borders with Russia and Belarus. For Lithuania, this would mean a total evacuation. In that case, even the capital would fall into a potential frontline zone. However, in Vilnius, they are confident that such a scenario is unlikely.
An emergency of such scale is unlikely to arise in a single day, so it would have to start with some localized evacuations. But we proceed from the assumption that ultimately our resources must be prepared for the evacuation of all Vilnius residents, all 600,000 people.
Meanwhile, in Estonia, which has closed its borders, local churches, schools, universities, and sports arenas are preparing to accommodate internally displaced persons. Special transport trains and buses are being allocated for this purpose. Residents are being informed about possible evacuation points. Maps and information about travel routes are being distributed. Europeans themselves are preparing food supplies and first aid kits. They are also packing emergency bags in case they need to flee suddenly.
People have been talking about this for a long time, for weeks and even months now, at work, everywhere. We'll see what happens. For now, we need to take care of the urgent matters.
The total population of the Baltic countries exceeds 6 million people. Of these, almost 2.9 million live in Lithuania, nearly 2 million in Latvia, and 1.4 million in Lithuania. 4 million people in Estonia. In Vilnius, they are preparing evacuation plans for about a quarter of the population. Latvia will evacuate a third, and Estonia 10%. According to military analysts, if Putin launches a full-scale offensive against the Baltic countries, every single resident there could become a refugee.
They have platforms for various types of missile forces which can strike in the shortest possible time. As one of our sources told us, these systems can literally be rolled out of the garages. For example, at the Luga military base, 100 kilometers from the Estonian border, it takes just 5 minutes to load Iskander missiles and launch them in a volume that covers the entire territory of Estonia and most of Latvia.
Meanwhile, Russian propaganda is foaming at the mouth, insisting that the Kremlin's intentions are purely peaceful and that the Baltic countries have nothing to fear. Even the bunker dweller himself, putting on an innocent face, tries to reassure the West.
After all, they have never initiated military confrontation. It's senseless, unnecessary, and simply absurd. They can't possibly believe that. They can't possibly believe what they're saying, that Russia is planning to attack NATO. Because it's impossible to believe such nonsense.
This is roughly how, on the eve of February 2022, Moscow insisted they had no intention of attacking Ukraine. In 2014, Putin also denied the involvement of Russian army soldiers in the annexation of Crimea. So it's no surprise that upon noticing the little green men, the Baltic countries began preparing for the worst.
The nature of hybrid warfare is such that you might not realize whether it's already a war, a single attack, or just an accident. Take, for example, the damaged cables and communications in the Baltic Sea or the plane that recently crashed in Lithuania. An attack or an accident? Not to mention the constant problems with GPS signals in the area of the Suwałki corridor.
And Putin's loyal friend Alexander Lukashenko is actively adding fuel to the fire at NATO's borders. He has once again managed to stage another dirty provocation. He suddenly put the Belarusian troops on alert. The country's Ministry of Defense cheerfully reported that units have already moved out to certain areas to carry out the tasks specified in the leader's order.
The armed forces units involved in the combat readiness check are moving to their designated areas.
However, analysts assure that all of this is more for show than actual preparation for a real invasion. Belarus will continue to constantly escalate the situation and threaten with combat readiness checks. As for the Russian army, it is so bogged down in the war in Ukraine that the Kremlin does not have the strength to open a second front. However, everything could change quickly.
Recruiting new soldiers takes quite a long time. But in principle, it's probably a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, something like that. Because there are quite capable units at the front in Ukraine, so all that's needed is to transfer them. That doesn't take much time. And then to rearm and somehow reorganize them.
Among experts, there is also the opinion that Russia is already preparing for war with NATO and could strike earlier than intelligence expects. Is anticipated by intelligence. The American Institute for the Study of War claims that Moscow has entered the so-called zero phase in preparing for a confrontation with the alliance. Russia is creating reserves and developing new tactics for waging war without the mass use of armored vehicles and is capable of launching new aggression without waiting for its army to fully recover after the war in Ukraine. And whether Putin will be deterred or will actually attack the Baltic countries, we will find out very soon.
An epic moment. Aliyev humiliated Putin in front of the world. Moscow exploded. No one expected such a turn of events. The dictator was forced to apologize loudly. At last, the Kremlin's influence in the Caucasus suffered a crushing defeat. A historic moment. Baku is supplying weapons to Kyiv. A slap that could finally finish off Putin. The balance of power is shifting every second. Russia is no longer in the lead. All about this in the report coming up in a moment.
Almost a year after the Azerbaijani plane was shot down over Grozny, Putin, with his tail between his legs, admitted Russia's guilt in the disaster.
The second reason lies in technical aspects, specifically the air defense system. The 2 missiles that were launched did not hit the plane directly. If that had happened, it would have crashed on the spot, but they exploded because there was self-destruction just a few meters away, about 10 meters. And that's precisely why the extensive damage occurred mainly not from the warhead striking elements, but most likely from the missile fragments themselves, which were propelled with considerable force.
Well, did he admit it? Of course, not completely. As always, Putin blamed everything on Ukraine.
The very first point is that in Nipil specifically, there was a region, the Ukrainian drone. We successfully launched 3 drones simultaneously, which then crossed the border of the Russian Federation during the night on the very day of the tragic event.
However, he still had to grovel before Aliyev, as well as promise to deal with those responsible and pay compensation. After all, for Russia, which is under unprecedented sanctions pressure, any partner willing to maintain trade with it means a great deal.
To the specific point or subject matter that we are currently discussing and focusing our attention upon, ensuring a thorough and comprehensive understanding of all its intricate details and implications.
After that, in Baku, the director of the Russian publication Sputnik was released, and in Russia, one of the detained Azerbaijani citizens was freed. But it's not that simple, because over a year of confrontation with Russia, Aliyev publicly took Ukraine's side and called Russia an occupier.
Ukraine, like the rest of the world, considers these occupied territories to be part of Ukraine. Azerbaijan also considers them part of Ukraine. How could they sacrifice that and say, no, this is not part of Ukraine?
In addition, Aliyev accepted as a gift the patches of the Ukrainian Armed Forces and advised Ukrainians not to agree to the occupation of their territories.
I think this is natural, and the desire of the Ukrainian people is never to agree to occupation. That is the main piece of advice. That is what we did.
And after Russia began shelling Azerbaijani oil depots and gas distribution stations in Ukraine, the media reported that Azerbaijan might lift the embargo on arms supplies. There were also reports that they had allegedly started producing ammunition for Ukraine.
We have provided humanitarian and financial aid totaling 40 million euros. And this assistance is ongoing. It is completely transparent and purely humanitarian in nature. We have implemented several social infrastructure projects in the city of Irpin and will continue to do so. You know that Ukrainian children regularly visit us as guests. We will do everything in our power to help.
After all, not only did the Russians refuse to admit responsibility for the downed plane, but they also began to harshly crack down on members of the Azerbaijani diaspora. 2 law enforcement officers were even killed, and Russian propagandists even threatened Azerbaijan with war.
Some of the victims have broken ribs. There are those who suffered spinal and internal organ injuries. If Azerbaijan hadn't intervened, the number of victims could have been hundreds of times higher.
And I want to remind you of the amount of money being transferred from Azerbaijan to Russia from Azerbaijan, not from Azerbaijan to Russia. And then apparently the situation could change dramatically. Is that exactly what they're counting on? Or, considering the 300 kilometers of border and reading about what they allow themselves to do and watching how, on central television, they allow themselves to say, "Do you want to go to war?"
At the SCO forum in Beijing, Aliyev shook Putin's hand very coldly and demonstratively refused to communicate with him.
That was unprecedented. We are not responsible for the destruction of relations. We respond constructively and lawfully, but we never support any signs or displays of aggression or disrespect towards us.
And of course, a real blow below the belt. Azerbaijan and Armenia signed a peace agreement in the US, completely ignoring Russia.
Armenia and Azerbaijan have pledged to permanently cease hostilities and open up trade. Thank you. To establish transport connections, diplomatic relations, and also to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Therefore, of course, Aliyev accepted all of Putin's humiliations for the sake of economic benefit for his country. But this does not mean at all that the bloody dictator and his terrorist country are forgiven, or that the former friendship will return.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
At this very moment, the fiery ring on the front line is tightening. The front line is under immense pressure. Our forces are holding back the onslaught of the occupiers. A Russian motorized unit has been completely destroyed. Instant retribution for their brazen assaults, mountains of equipment heading only one way. And on top of that, partisans have done the incredible, a shield for the front line. All the enemy's plans have come to nothing. The footage of the battles is not for the faint-hearted. The Russians are squealing, the Kremlin is losing control of the situation. Mobilization has been disrupted. Could it be that tomorrow Putin really will have no one left to send to the front? An honest answer is coming up in the next segment.
The Russian army is attacking along the entire front line, but is making almost no progress anywhere, according to the Institute for the Study of War. The next offensive planned by the Russian General Staff includes the Kharkiv region in particular. Near Vovchansk, the enemy gathered enough forces for a breakthrough, but lost even before the offensive began. Atej partisans report that their agent from the 82nd Motorized Rifle Regiment was able to transmit the exact coordinates of Russian artillery positions, armored vehicles, and the locations of the occupiers. Because of this, Ukraine's defense forces were able to prepare in advance for possible offensive actions and strike the enemy. As a result of the effective work of Ukrainian troops, the Russian plan collapsed even before it began.
Taking into account the weather conditions, the rather uncomfortable weather, and for example, the reduced intensity of our drones operations, because the birds simply either won't be able to see or won't be able to take off, the enemy will try to carry out more active assault actions. In particular, this includes the use of mechanized components, which we are already observing today in certain areas of the front.
At the same time, the situation remains tense in the area around the city of Kupiansk. There, our military is also recording an accumulation of enemy forces who are constantly trying to increase their presence in the settlement. However, despite repeated attempts to launch new assaults, Russia has made no advances in this direction.
Taking the enemy into account, they managed to reach the outskirts of the city. You know that fighting continues there in the northwest and northern parts of the city. The enemy is trying to infiltrate with sabotage and reconnaissance groups into the central part of Kupiansk as well. The situation is very difficult. Their goal is to break into open terrain and try to advance further through Kharkiv region. The attempt to seize the city, Kupiansk, as a hub is also about logistics. It's an attempt to cut off our logistics, to create unfavorable conditions for those groups of troops located at this section of the front and at neighboring ones.
The Dobropilya direction is probably the hottest spot on the front today. In the past 24 hours, intense fighting has broken out there for the settlement of Volodymyrivka. It is from there that the Russians are trying to break through to their own forces who remain encircled here.
An additional problem was the landing of paratroopers. Deep State adds, the Russians brought between 50 and 75 infantrymen into the village. The situation is becoming complicated. The Russian armed forces are expected to make maximum use of the worsening weather conditions. Analysts say, later, the 1st Corps of the National Guard Azov reported that they still managed to hold Volodymyrivka.
According to the Corps' statement, the Russians launched their assault with 35 units of heavy armored vehicles, including tanks and armored fighting vehicles. As a result of the defensive actions, 1 armored recovery vehicle, 3 tanks, and 16 enemy armored fighting vehicles were destroyed or damaged. The Russians also lost 41 motorcycles and 2 light vehicles. Near the neighboring town of Pokrovsk, the Russians also decided to amass their forces. A group of infantry on motorcycles set out to break through. As a result, 13 motorcyclists were eliminated and there was no advance. Another epic video from Donetsk region. Ukrainian drones versus Russian tanks. The armed forces of Ukraine showed how our soldiers destroyed half a dozen enemy tanks and a Grad rocket system. The video was published by the UAV forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Thus, in the Donetsk direction, operators of the 427th Separate UAV Regiment Rayrog stopped the enemy's assault actions by disabling 5 tanks at once. As a result, they deprived the infantry groups of cover and made further advance impossible, according to the report. In addition, the military delivered an effective strike on a BM-21 Grad multiple rocket launcher system. This happened while the enemy was firing at the positions of the Ukrainian army. According to the command, the defense forces have now managed to gain a tactical advantage in this area. At the same time, our military is operating both along the front line and in the rear of the Russian group. For example, in occupied Donetsk, a large fire broke out after drone strikes.
Vitaly, this is...
According to local residents, plumes of black smoke could be seen from any part of the city. It is known that the site of the strike was the former Auchan hypermarket near the Sloviansk-Donetsk-Mariupol bypass road. However, residents reported online that after the strikes, they clearly heard further detonations. And the night before, a concentration of military vehicles was seen near the store. It is known that as a result of the fire, the roof of the building collapsed and the premises were completely burned out.
It's catching fire, apparently.
Meanwhile, in Russia, against the backdrop of failures at the front, the pace of mobilization has sharply declined. Recruitment into the ranks of the occupiers has dropped almost threefold. This is already being felt by units at the front, said Ivan Timochko, head of the Council of Reservists of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. According to him, the Russian Federation is trying to solve this problem in several ways. In particular, they have passed in the first reading a draft law that allows for conscription mobilization throughout the year. Timochko says that Russia may use conscripts, including in the war against Ukraine.
In the last 2 quarters, they have been recruiting by quarters, not even by months, about 30,000 to 35,000. Whereas previously this number was recruited in a month, now it takes 3 months. So now they are recruiting 10,000 to 12,000 per month.
At the same time, military analysts note that in the Russian information space, they no longer even hide the prospects for the newly mobilized, openly stating that on average, after deployment, their life expectancy is less than 2 weeks after signing the contract.
The mayor of the city of Strizhevoy in the Tomsk region has reached a new level of candor. He honestly said that new contract soldiers are needed to replace those who have been killed and wounded. According to the mayor, on Friday he recruits new people and on Monday he buries the old ones. War correspondent Romanov provided a more detailed explanation of why people are constantly needed at the front. The life expectancy of an assault soldier is 12 days. That's from the moment the contract is signed, training at the range and the assault itself included. In the singular, a typical assault, just 1.
And this statistic is relentlessly confirmed by the armed forces of Ukraine. According to the General Staff, in the past 24 hours alone, the occupiers have lost over 1,200 of their soldiers. In total, Russian losses have exceeded 1,122,000 people.
The Black Sea is erupting with events. Ukrainian drones are heading straight for the Black Sea fleet. Our forces act swiftly and without mercy. The enemy doesn't have time to react and the Kremlin urgently switches to alert mode. A powerful wave of attack starts 5,000 kilometers away and now engulfs the Russian coast. Ukrainian Armed Forces unmanned boats are rushing straight into the heart of the inferno. The strikes are precise, the sea roars with explosions. This is no longer just an operation, it's a symbol of retribution. Will it be possible to break Russia's might and force it to retreat? More on this in the following report.
The final days of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. There is less and less time left until the occupiers are defeated. This week, Ukraine marks the 3rd anniversary of the first strike on the Crimean Bridge. On October 8, 2022, a powerful explosion rocked the crossing, seriously damaging the road surface and the railway line. At that time, Ukraine saw the emergence of an entirely new and unique branch of the military and its own cutting-edge weapon, naval drones.
As a result of the incident, car traffic on the Crimean Bridge was halted.
That was when the whole world learned what Ukrainian naval drones are capable of.
Ukraine demonstrated that its naval drones, here they are, there's probably a picture of what they look like. These naval drones are an effective weapon.
Over the past 3 years, Ukrainian naval UAVs have become the masters of the Black Sea. Meanwhile, Putin's much vaunted Black Sea fleet is forced to hide from our drones in remote ports.
This is essentially a kind of army of the future. It's an element that will help save human lives and allow for more effective operations.
The effectiveness of modern Ukrainian naval weaponry is hard to deny. They managed to break through the enemy's defense system time and again, reaching Russian ports and bays.
Drones are very visible both in the air and on the ground. And they're targeted, including by automatic cannons. So basically, they're firing aimed shots, but it's more like shooting by eye, and yet they can't hit it, you see. And I saw it again. Despite the excellent lighting, it's perfectly visible. It's moving relatively close, and they still can't hit it. It's a total disaster.
With every new attack on Russian warships, Ukrainian drones are becoming more and more advanced technologically.
Of course, now they will undoubtedly continue to keep targeting this entire critical chain simply because the Ukrainians have taken this particular situation on very seriously. They're succeeding. They see that Russia's air defense system is failing everywhere, so why not give it a try?
Now, Putin no longer has a single remote base in the Black Sea where the bunker dweller could hide his fleet from Ukrainian drones. It has just become known that Ukroboronprom has signed a cooperation agreement with American partners. This gives Ukraine the opportunity to acquire an entirely new type of drone ekranoplans with a range of almost 5,000 kilometers and a payload of 1 ton.
We have agreed to cooperate within the float and fly concept, and we also plan to jointly develop solutions to increase the speed and stability of our products. We are interested in developing production on the territory of Ukraine as well as organizing training for our weapons specialists.
This news has triggered yet another wave of panic in the Kremlin. Now every military vessel and all, without exception, Russian army bases in the Black Sea are in the crosshairs of the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
We can clearly see that both the impressive quantity and the superior quality of these advanced drones allow courageous Ukrainian soldiers to effectively vary their strategic use and meticulously create a certain optimal mix of different types of these crucial aerial vehicles to comprehensively achieve their critical objectives.
And Ukrainian soldiers, like no one else, know how to achieve their goals by any means possible. It's no coincidence that they are setting global trends in maritime operations. Ukraine's naval drones have prompted other countries to adopt similar technologies. Today, our unmanned boats are the main participants in modern exercises conducted by Portugal. In front of representatives of NATO naval forces, with the involvement of dozens of defense and technology companies and their experimental weapons, a 3-week battle for control over a notional 10,000 square miles of ocean is taking place. As a result of the prolonged sea battle, Ukrainian drones demonstrated their highest effectiveness. Now, according to military experts, the experience gained by the armed forces of Ukraine is being scaled up in the Black Sea.
Ukraine has acquired, and this is confirmed by all recent cases, an effective military force to counter Russia's naval monopoly. In fact, it has undermined that monopoly.
If a year ago Ukrainian drones had effectively driven the Russian fleet out of Sevastopol, now it will have no peace. And in Novorossiysk, the Kremlin can't keep up with Ukraine's new maritime technologies. While Russian sailors are training to shoot at surface targets, Magura drones, for example, are being equipped with machine guns, anti-aircraft, and anti-ship missiles. Some of them even act as miniature aircraft carriers, serving as launch pads. By invading Ukraine in 2014, Putin provoked a revolution in naval warfare. Over the past 3 years, Ukraine has completely rewritten the course of such battles. And Western experts are already comparing its contribution to the development of naval forces to such technological breakthroughs of their time as the construction of submarines or even the advent of steam power replacing sails on ships.
That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hatsakalo. Even more scorching news in our next episode. Then in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.